What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage. Really, we're going to wrap up our coverage over the Thing Space Ranger story arc. Let me explain, just in case you're new to my channel. You see, back in 1983, when it came to Marvel Comics, they gave the Thing, one of the members of the Fantastic Four, his own solo book. Now, his book did run for a very short period of time, like 28 issues, possibly 30. But 12 of those issues were technically used to tell a story arc called the Space Ranger story arc, because it took place right after the whole original Secret Wars story arc. We had our heroes fighting against a group of bad guys on Battleworld. Now remember, when it comes to Battleworld, it was technically a patchwork of different pieces of different planets across the universe that was put together by the Beyonder, where you had our heroes fighting against a group of bad guys on Battleworld. But once you had the story wrap up, you have Ben Grimm decide to go ahead and stay on Battleworld. And the reason why? Because he was able to turn back into his regular human form, something he could not do back on Earth. And so he said, you know what? Let me go ahead and stay here on Battleworld to figure out why in the world I am allowed to turn back into a regular human, but also enjoy the idea of not having to be a rock monster. Now, something we have to remember when it comes to the whole idea of Ben Grimm being on Battleworld is that apparently he has been going through a lot of weird events. Not apparently, like, they have been happening. We've been seeing it. But the problem is Ben Grimm has no idea why all these different things are happening to him. So for example, in the last few chapters that we had covered, well, he has been attacked by someone known as the Wizard. Now, we have no idea who the Wizard is, but this video here is finally going to tell us who is the Wizard who has been trying to come after Ben Grimm. And apparently the Wizard, he says he knows Ben Grimm very well. So in this video, we're going to learn who is this actual person. Now, there is one more character we have to talk about, and that would be Tana. Now, remember, Tana was found by Ben Grimm when he was going around Battleworld, and really, he found her nearby a small village that looked very similar to Doomstadt, a major city in Latveria back on Earth. And we had learned in that chapter that basically Dr. Doom had left behind some kind of projector in the middle of Battleworld. So when Ben Grimm found the actual Doomstadt city, well, it wasn't actually Doomstadt. It was just a projected image that Dr. Doom was able to produce and left behind. And so once you had Ben Grimm being able to get rid of projector, well, the entire village had disappeared, except for Tana. And the big question is right now, why did she stay behind? Now for Ben, he believes because Reed told him that maybe because his mind is somehow affecting Battleworld, because he wanted her around so badly, well, she stuck around. But again, the last few chapters of the story arc is going to explain everything for us. Now, the next chapter we have to talk about does not take place in the Thing series. It actually takes place in Fantastic Four issue number 274. Now, for me personally, it kind of felt like this was Marvel trying to help promote the idea that Ben Grimm had his own book, so that more fans can go ahead and buy his book to keep the book going. Because like I said though, when it came to Ben Grimm, he had his own series, but it didn't last that long. Matter of fact, it only lasted for like 30 issues maybe. And so by the end of the story arc, they were hitting issue number 22. Now, with all that being said, we actually do pick up at the home of Reed and Susan Richards. You see, when it came to Reed and Susan Richards, around this time in Marvel Comics, they wanted to live a somewhat normal life, kind of move away from the idea of being the Fantastic Four, of being heroes. And so you have the two characters being able to buy a home in Bellport, Connecticut. Now, here's the thing. When they bought the home, they made sure that no one would find out that they were actually the Richards, because again, the Fantastic Four was a very well-known group of heroes. And so you had our heroes say, you know what? Let's give ourselves fake names, the Benjamins. But here comes the problem though. They have a nosy neighbor. And so every once in a while, she's trying her best to get enough proof to prove that there's something going on with the Benjamins, the Richards. And so when you have She-Hulk being there and being able to change into her Hulk form to get an earring for Susan that fell underneath the fridge, well, their nosy neighbor saw it and she begins to freak out. And she runs back home to call somebody to help her deal with this situation. She has no idea her neighbors, the Benjamins, are actually the Richards. Now, something else I do want to talk about is the whole idea that, well, Susan and Reed had just lost a baby. See, when it came to Reed and Sue, we already know that they have two kids. Of course, Franklin and Valeria. Now, unfortunately, Valeria was not conceived in a normal way like other kids are in Marvel Comics. Really, I guess some kids, because some kids are not conceived in a normal way in Marvel Comics. But for Valeria, she died actually. For Susan and Reed, they had unfortunately had to lose the baby. Now, we all know that down the road, thanks to Dr. Doom, he was able to bring her back to life. But around this time, no, there was no Valeria. She had officially died when Susan was still pregnant with her. And so when you have Sue walk into the room that was going to be Valeria's room, it hit Susan really hard. And unfortunately, she collapsed on the ground, crying. But now we have to jump over to the Baxter building. Now, when we do, we are trying to establish the idea that, well, the Fantastic Four is no longer going to be using the Baxter building as their main base. And the reason why, because none of the members of the current team is actually staying there. Johnny, She-Hulk, Reed, and Sue, they all have different homes in different areas around the world. So it's kind of like, why should we stay here at the Baxter building and use it for our base? And also for Reed, he kind of want to have a bigger lab to be able to do more experiments. And unfortunately, he's not allowed to kick out other tenants in the actual Baxter building. So it's kind of like, hey, if I want to expand my labs, I need a bigger base. But also, what's the big deal of us losing the Baxter building if none of us is actually living here? Now, something else I have to mention is that Johnny Storm is dating Alicia Masters, the girlfriend to Ben Grimm. But here's the catch though. You see, down the road, they're going to retcon and say that this is not Alicia Masters. That matter of fact, this is a Skrull that is pretending to be her. And I'm not really going to dive too deep into that. Just know that right now, it's not Alicia Masters actually cheating on Ben Grimm and getting with Johnny Storm. But for Reed, he's kind of like, it's weird, but Alicia does a great job taming Johnny. But Reed is concerned when Ben comes back, how will Ben feel about the idea of his ex-girlfriend now dating, well, his teammate? But now we can jump back over to Ben Grimm. Now, the last time we saw Ben Grimm, he was actually fighting against Dracula and also fighting against the Mummy. And really, at the end of our last video, he was confronted by Frankenstein. Now, Ben Grimm does remember what Reed had told him, the whole idea that Battleworld could be affected in the way of how you think. And so for Ben Grimm, he kind of feels like the reason why he's being confronted by all these different kinds of monsters is because, well, he had thoughts about these creatures before. Dracula, the Mummy, Frankenstein. Either way, you do have Ben trying his best to fight against the monster, but to only be able to win because, well, someone had knocked out Frankenstein by using a tranquilizer. And really, they used one on Ben Grimm as well too to knock him out. Now, once you have Ben Grimm being able to wake back up, you have Ben Grimm realize that he's now being held in some kind of truck and being transported over to, well, who knows where. But then he's confronted by a character known as Gregor Lupus. Now, Lupus is actually a werewolf, so now we have another creature of the night. Now, with all that being said, you didn't have Ben Grimm find out that they're being technically prisoners for a guy known as the Monster Maker. And the guy who had knocked out Ben Grimm earlier is a guard that works for the Monster Maker. Now, Ben realized that the Monster Maker has no idea that Ben can change forms. And so you have Ben being able to change back into his regular human form. Now, with him doing that, of course, you do have the Monster Maker realize there's something wrong in the back of his truck, and so he tells his guard, hey, let's go check things out. And it does lead into a whole battle scene where you have Ben Grimm fighting against the Monster Maker and his guard, and you have the Monster Maker use the werewolf as a way to fight against Ben Grimm. But after a few pages, you do have Ben being able to defeat the guard, take down the werewolf, and you have Frankenstein kill off the Monster Maker to allow them to finally be free. Now, once you have our heroes realize that they're finally free, you didn't have Ben Grimm say goodbye because, well, he still needs to find Tariana. She was kidnapped in our last video by the wizard, and so he begins to walk away, except when he turns around and sees Frankenstein and the werewolf, they're no longer there, kind of like saying they never were in the first place. And so as we jump into The Thing issue number 20, we actually pick up with Tariana. Now, this is Tariana on some kind of stage. Now, for Tariana, it does seem like somebody is trying to mess with her mind. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you have her being attacked by, well, clones of Ben Grimm, but Ben in his Thing form. And so for Tariana, she's kind of wondering why in the world is she being attacked by clones of the Thing. But for right now, she has no choice but to go ahead and defend herself against this clone who's attacking her. But the problem is that when she goes to attack the Thing or the clone of the Thing, when she stabs it, well, Ben Grimm in the real world actually feels it. And we do learn that yes, her mind is being played with by the wizard. We have the wizard being able to hook her mind up to some kind of device. And with this device, well, unfortunately, everything she does in her mind, so fighting against the clones of Ben Grimm, the real Ben Grimm is going to feel it. Now, we already know that this wizard is someone who apparently has a lot of hatred towards Ben Grimm, but also knows a lot about Ben Grimm. Now for Ben, he does remember the whole idea that somehow his thoughts could possibly affect how Battleworld actually works out, meaning that his thoughts can change the appearance or things happening on Battleworld. The Beyonder kind of told Reed that, and Reed told, well, Ben that. And so it's Ben kind of wondering the whole idea of Tariana and everything else he's been through on Battleworld has all been done because what he's currently thinking about are his past thoughts on different subjects going on in his life. Either way, you have been realized that all the pain he's feeling must come from somewhere, but he kind of realized that if he wants to protect himself from the harm of those random attacks, he needs to change into his Ben Grimm form. But the problem is, he's no longer able to actually do it. Now for Tariana, her mind's still being played with. In matter of fact, we see her being transported over to a different set in her mind. And this time, it's Yancey Street, the home street to Ben Grimm, but back on Earth. Now for Tariana, she actually been on a different version of Yancey Street on Battleworld, because Ben Grimm and her had went on a lot of different adventures. And one of those adventures was him kind of thinking about home and actually finding a different version of Yancey Street, but him not realizing it was Yancey Street. Either way, she's currently on Yancey Street in her mind and about to fight against another clone of the Thing. Except she doesn't find any more clones of Ben Grimm. Instead, she finds a younger version of Ben Grimm who's crying over a toy of the Thing that is completely broken. Now, we could technically say that this is Ben Grimm kind of feeling about the idea of being broken inside because of how the form of the Thing had changed his life completely and all the negative things that happened to him because he was the Thing. Either way, you do have Tariana realize that her mind is being played with. And so she is able to break out a machine that the wizard had put her mind inside of. Now, the wizard is very surprised that Tariana was able to break out of his machine so easily, but she tells him the reason why, because how much she loves Ben Grimm. But here's the catch though. You have the wizard say, how can you love a man you barely even know? A man you just barely met. Like, there's no way that you are madly in love with the guy you don't truly know. And matter of fact, let me show you that you don't know what really is going on. And so you have the wizard pull down his mask to reveal who he truly is to her, but not us, the readers. But now for Ben Grimm, we see him trying to get over to where the wizard could possibly be at. Now for Ben, he's also considering the idea of just giving up, going back home to Earth. Let's not forget that when it came to Reed gave Ben a device that he can use to teleport him right back over to Earth when Ben is ready. And so for Ben, it does seem like he is ready, but he's not ready to give up just yet. He wants to save Tariana's life. But then he realized that, Battleworld has been affecting me in different kinds of ways, throwing at me all my worst fears. All the worst things I thought about myself have been here in front of me on Battleworld. But then he sees the Baxter building. Now, when he does see the Baxter building, he begins to think that really all of this Battleworld and what Battleworld has done to him is all because of Reed Richards. Because those two guys are best friends and Reed knows everything about Ben. It only makes sense that it would be Reed who's currently messing with Ben. And so you have Ben walking over to the Baxter building demanding to see Reed Richards. But in reality, inside the actual Baxter building, it's not Reed, it's Tariana and the wizard. And the wizard is Ben Grimm himself. Now, as we dive into issue number 21, the next chapter for today's video, I kind of want to focus more on Ben Grimm here for a moment, the evil Ben Grimm. And here's the reason why, because he does explain what's really happening in this story arc. You see, like I said earlier, when it came to Reed told Ben that Battleworld is going to change constantly with Ben's thoughts, because back in Secret Wars, for our heroes and the bad guys, they kind of realized the same thing as well, that their thoughts kind of kept changing the world around them. And so Reed warned Ben, be careful by staying here on Battleworld. Well, you see, Battleworld kind of realized that Ben wanted to turn back into his human form, which it did give to him. But here's the catch though. Battleworld also realized that Ben's having a hard time trying to decide what he actually wants to be. The Thing or be Ben Grimm, the human Ben Grimm. And so while you have Ben going back and forth between the two forms, you have Battleworld go out of its way to create another Ben Grimm. You see, it's Battleworld saying that Ben Grimm has to decide what he wants to do here. Does he want to be the Thing? Does he want to be a human? He has to choose one or the other. He can't have both. And so with that being said, for the evil Ben Grimm, what he wants to do is get rid of our Ben Grimm so that he's able to replace him, but also be the human Ben Grimm. How Ben should always be on Earth, a human. But if this Ben Grimm does die, then that means, well, our Ben Grimm will unfortunately turn back into the Thing. Now, getting back over to our Ben Grimm, he's outside right now. He's still trying to get inside the Baxter building, but the problem is he can't get inside. And the reason why? Because he needs to hit the button, because if you are a resident in the Baxter building, you have to be buzzed in. The doorman has to let you in. And so Ben realized there's no buzzer. And so you have been going out of his way to test his theory, the whole idea that his mind can control how Battleworld works. And so he thinks up a button to buzz himself in, and you have the doorman allow Ben in. But the problem is, if you are a member of the Fantastic Four, you need some kind of special key to get into the top level of the Baxter building, the base of the Fantastic Four. But Ben Grimm, our Ben Grimm, does not have that. And so you have the doorman believe that Ben is actually an imposter, even though it is the real Ben Grimm. Now you do have Ben being able to knock out the doorman, but then he begins to climb up the elevator shaft, hoping to get to the top in time. But he also realized that it'd be a whole lot faster if he was, in his Thing form. But currently he cannot change into his Thing form. Now, I want to jump back over to Ben Grimm, the evil Ben Grimm, because we currently see him change into the Thing. Not completely, but he is kind of getting into that form. Now, here is the reason why I kind of want to sit down and talk about this, because he believes that it is Tariana who's somehow able to use her mind, kind of change what's happening around her. For example, what's happening to him. But then you have the evil Ben Grimm tell her that she's not even real at all. That matter of fact, she's fake. That Ben Grimm brought her to life. And here is a good reason why. Because of Alicia Masters. So let me explain. When it comes to Ben Grimm was madly in love with Alicia. But like I said earlier, those two characters began to kind of fall apart from one another. The love is still there, but it was not the same as it was at the very beginning of the relationship. And so because of that, you have Ben Grimm saying he loves her, but at the same time, he does not fully love her. It's him trying to move away from her, but he still wants her around. And so because his love for Alicia Masters, it led to Battleworld creating Tariana. And Tariana was something new and fresh to kind of give Ben something to replace Alicia Masters with. And so when it comes to Tariana, she's not real because, again, Battleworld is being changed by the thoughts of Ben Grimm. Now, for Ben Grimm, he does regain the ability to actually, turn into the Thing. He does try to climb up the elevator shaft, but then you have the elevator shaft, really, the entire building begin to beat down on him to the point where he does fall straight down to the very bottom of the elevator shaft, which does land him right in front of his evil self, but also Tariana, who still is a prisoner. Now, the opening pages to the final chapter really does establish that what I said earlier is actually true. Ben Grimm and Alicia Masters not really being in love with one another anymore. Like, yes, they love each other, but it's not the true meaning of love. They're kind of falling out of love from one another. And the reason why, because you have Ben Grimm kind of going through this somewhat dream sequence where he's finally back on Earth. He goes to his apartment building. He's right now in his human form. He knocks on the door to see his girlfriend Alicia Masters, to tell her that he's now back into his human form. But she hates the idea that he is human, that she only loved the idea when he was the Thing. And so because he has now changed, she can no longer love him. And so they do begin to argue. And once he does wake up, he realizes that he's now in some kind of gladiator arena. Now, this is really a huge moment because Ben Grimm had no idea the entire time the story arc that he was being messed with by, well, his own self. Because Battleworld realized that Ben Grimm had a hard time deciding what he wanted to do or what he wanted to be. Does he want to be Ben Grimm, or does he want to be the Thing? He had to decide. And so you have Battleworld say, because you're having a hard time deciding what you want to be, I'm going to go ahead and create another Ben Grimm, a human Ben Grimm for you to fight against, to kind of help you decide in what way your life should actually be, or what you should think your life should be. Should you be Ben Grimm? Should you be the Thing? And so for the evil Ben Grimm, even though he knows what his purpose was, thanks to Battleworld, he still wants to get rid of our Ben Grimm, to be the only one standing, so that he can go back to Earth to be the regular Ben Grimm. But our Ben Grimm realized that most likely at the end of the battle, he's going to lose the ability to turn back into his regular form. And the reason why, because Battleworld is the only place he can actually do it. And Battleworld was the only place that gave him that ability. Now, the ending of the story does kind of wrap up very quickly here, because we do get into the final battle between the Ben Grimms. Now, while you have the two Ben Grimms fighting against each other, there was a plot line that I did not really mention. And honestly, I'm not going to sit down and to explain it, because it's not really important for the overall story. It's just the idea that Ultron's head was found by a girl we saw in the early parts of our coverage over the Space Ranger story arc. But she lost the head by the Takers. And you had the Takers give the head back over to her. And then she was able to bring Ultron back to life. And then Ultron decided that he's going to lead an army of robots to take over Battleworld. That plot line is not really important at all when it comes to the overall story arc of Space Ranger. Either way, getting back over to Ben Grimm fighting against, well, Ben Grimm, you do have the two characters go back and forth. But the evil Ben Grimm is about to win. And so it does seem like we're about to lose the good old Ben Grimm until you have Tana being able to grab a blade and stab the evil Ben Grimm in the back. Now, this is very important. And here's the reason why. Because Ben Grimm wanted to get rid of the evil version of himself, the human form of himself. But also when he does that, is Battleworld saying, okay, you know what? I'm done. I helped you decide what you wanted in life. The whole idea that you wanted to be the Thing, because you technically thought of the idea of getting rid of your human form. And because of that thought, Tana, who's not real, she was only created because of his thoughts. She said, you know what? I am somewhat being controlled by Ben's thoughts, and I have to go ahead and get rid of the evil Ben Grimm. And so when she does that, that basically means that Battleworld is done helping out Ben decide what he wanted to do in life. And so everything around him begins to disappear. And really so does Ultron Army as well. But either way, you do have everything disappear. The evil Ben Grimm, the arena, and also Tana, because Battleworld is done helping out Ben. And with Battleworld being done, well, Ben has no choice but to go ahead and go back home to Earth. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. It is literally the end of Space Ranger, and you have Ben go back to Earth to continue on to be a hero back on Earth. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see you next time. Later.